Hello, Marie. How are you? Welcome, everyone, to Friday afternoon at the Manor. And we decided to leapfrog through seasons. We pole vaulted towards December as we had snow this morning. I'm jesting, of course. No, as we know, it's May, it's Toronto, and we're reminded that uh, even though it is warmer, we're not totally warm yet. And so it's a delight. Here we gather inside, hopefully soon to be spending more time outside. I think it's a geranium on Betty's mantle there or something. I think that's quite lovely. And we,
Orchid.
orchid, okay, well, even better. I like orchids. And pass our wonderful leadership over to Susan, who will welcome our guest speaker.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming today. We are very happy to welcome Helen Fisch, who is speaking on grandmothers partnering with Africa, which sounds fascinating. So, Helen, welcome.
Thank you. I think, yes. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Zoe Levitt and I are really pleased to be here, and I'm looking forward to sharing some stories with you and some slides, and hopefully, if it works, a video, or a video or two. So we will see how that goes. So I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about the Stephen Lewis Foundation, which we are a part of, and how this Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign began. And I'll just give you a bit of a hint about what it is that I'm going to talk about. First of all, I want to just identify what the underlying issue was, that the underlying problem that was the catalyst for forming the Stephen Lewis Foundation, how it formed, and how something called the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign grew out of that. And then I want to tell you a little bit about how the campaign works, what some of the results we've seen are. I want to give you some projects that have been the recipients of the funding from the foundation. And then finally, I want to tell you about our specific group that Zoe and I belong to, how it started, and what we do, and what we continue to hope to do. So first of all, especially during these days of COVID, it's hard to sometimes put our minds back to thinking about the pandemic. I feel like for many of us, the word pandemic first came into our vocabulary when we talked about HIV and AIDS. And now we have the COVID pandemic, but HIV/AIDS isn't over, and the pandemic aspect of it isn't over. There are still 27 million people living with HIV in sub-Saharan Africa. 14.8 million, just under 15 million kids have lost either one or both parents to AIDS. And in 2019, there were 730,000 new HIV infections in this region. I mean, that's a staggering number. And it hasn't gone away. And we can talk a little bit about that as well. Where we're seeing the greatest increase is in adolescent girls and young women between the ages of 15 and 24. The UN AIDS, that's where I got this information from, the UN AIDS 2020 report. They estimate that 4,500 adolescent girls become infected with HIV every week. And 5 out of every 6 new infections among adolescents are girls. You may want to ask why, and one of the reasons is violence against women, and the incidence of rape has really impacted this age group dramatically, and it continued. HIV and AIDS continue to spread, and the Stephen Lewis Foundation continues to feel that it has a very necessary role to play in helping these people. So let me tell you a little bit about how the foundation got started. In January of 2003, Stephen Lewis, who is known to many of us, he was a veteran Canadian politician, and he'd been the former Canadian ambassador to the UN. He was interviewed by the Globe and Mail, actually on January 4th, 2003, And he was talking about the fact that he had been considering starting a foundation to raise funds to combat the effects of HIV and AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa, an area that was very close to his own heart. And what happened was the money started to come to him before the foundation was even formed. And by June of 2003, just 6 months after he had first talked about it, the foundation had already raised $275,000. A couple of years later, really at a kitchen table, Stephen Lewis and his wife, Michelle Landsberg, and their daughter, Alana Landsberg Lewis, were talking about how amazing the grandmothers that they were seeing in sub-Saharan Africa were doing. Because these, of course, were the women who had not only lost and buried their own children, which was the group, the demographic that was most dramatically hit. They not only had to mourn their deaths, they now had to take care of their grandchildren. And they were rising to the occasion. They were becoming the primary caregivers, and they were rising to that occasion. At the same time, Alana Landsberg Lewis had just become a mother herself, and Michelle Landsberg had just become a grandmother. And both of them were saying, how are they doing this? This is such a dramatic request and requirement on these women. And the two women in the Landsberg Lewis family believed that if Canadian grandmothers knew the story of what was going on in Africa, they would step up and they would relate and they would empathize, and perhaps they would even be able to raise some money. And they did not know at that time how profound a change this idea they had was going to make in the lives of both Canadian and African women. So in March 2006, the Stephen Lewis Foundation launched an initiative that they called the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign, which is generally called G2G. And they held a meeting in Toronto. It was the first gathering, and the picture on the left, and actually on the right as well, both of these pictures were taken in 2006 when a group of grandmothers were brought to Toronto, and the foundation, or the group, the initiative called Grandmothers to Grandmothers began. And there were a couple of underlying principles for it. One was that all the programs that were going to be funded had to be at the grassroots level. There were not going to be any governments involved, and no super agencies, no World Bank, African Development Bank. This was all going to be small, grassroots, small groups, and the African women were going to design and implement these programs to meet their own needs. The belief was that people know what they need, and if you go to these people, they can tell you what they need. So right from the beginning, the ethos was that this was not charity. African women were going to take the leadership, and it was going to be a partnership, a solidarity with Canadian women who were going to provide funding, and that was the partnership. We were going to provide the funding, they were going to provide the know-how. And together, this movement has really grown to quite a dramatic size, and I'm going to tell you about that. So now we're going to try, and this takes a few seconds to load. So I am going to tell you what this video was. It's now been 15 years since the Stephen Lewis Foundation was founded, rather the Grandmothers Campaign, I apologize. And 5 years ago, there was a film made to rededicate, to re-energize and rededicate. And this is a 5-minute film about grandmothers. It was done on the 10th anniversary, and it's just loading now. So please enjoy.
Grandmothers have held
Can we hear
communities
it?
together at a time when nobody
Can you
knew
hear
what
it?
to do about the number of deaths.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The economic and the social impacts on communities. Grandmothers stepped into the breach because no one else was doing anything. No one else was taking the initiative.
Something just happened. Sorry,
I think it seems like it advanced the end.
it did advance to the end. At least you know I say thank you at the end.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. We'll get back to. I've never had happen before, so.
Sorry, Helen, I can't help you. It's not my area.
No, it's fine. It's fine, Zoe. I'm just going to, I'm going to stop the share and then start the share again. So. And I'm going to skip past this. Well, we'll try it one more time. And if it doesn't work, we're skipping on to the next slide. I'll tell you what these women said.
There you go.
Who were sick, the economic and the social impacts on communities. Grandmothers stepped into the breach because no one else was doing anything. No one else was taking the initiative.
When HIV/AIDS came, it came with a new responsibility upon the grannies. Because when the parents are dying, they are leaving the children to the grannies. So it is as if the grannies, after being parents, they start all over again being parents and parents and parents again.
I lost my daughter of HIV and AIDS, living with 3 children. That time it was very hard for me. I was just weak, hopeless, and only deciding, why am I living? Why must I not die? I must also die. So by talking to other grannies, I get a spirit of, why me thinking of dying? And they say, we must come together. Le HIV bacicile batali babo sebasele bahleli bodwana. Nginakekele bantwana bami labasithupha. Senani ndendera ilala esiyona yonetekeri. Era kuti nifoto etiso buvunani zibwa. Abantu abandi bwe batali kwetika. Kale nga twenda tubalage tulina kyo tulikola tiso nga tuli bakaire. Bategeere nti tulina omulimu gwe tulikola. I couldn't bear it to just sit by and do nothing. And also at the same time, I felt like it wasn't enough just to write a check, that somehow or other we had to connect. And well, how that connection has worked out has been amazing. Knowledge. We need a skill which can take us somewhere. As grandmothers from Africa and Canada, we were drawn together by our similarities, our deep love and undying devotion to our children and grandchildren, our profound concern about the havoc that HIV/AIDS has inflicted on the continent of Africa. We, the grandmothers of Africa, speak to you now as the guardians of the future. Our labor is with all of his struggles, challenges, knowledge, and triumphs, has gone unheeded for too long.
Community-based organizations are not only responding to the needs of the grandmothers, they are also empowering the grandmothers to speak for themselves.
They have embraced this challenge because if they do not, it dehumanizes them. It dehumanizes their children. It dehumanizes you and me. If all of us came together and supported each other and we had the means to do this, we would achieve that dream that seems so impossible of raising an HIV-free generation.
So if you remember, I had said that their initial goal was $25,000. In fact, in the last 15 years, it's now the 15th anniversary, $130.7 million has been dispersed for program spending at the grassroots level. The Stephen Lewis Foundation works in 15 African countries. It's got partners with 325 community-based organizations, and to date, it has funded 1,800 projects. Not alone, often in partnership, but in partnership with other like-minded entities. And as I will show you, always at the grassroots. So where does the money go? Well, sorry. I'm just going to show you sorry about that. As I said, we're just in, not just, but we are in Sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa, there are 15 countries that are the recipients of the funding. And there are specific program areas that are funded. They are food, educational supplies, uniforms, school fees, medical care, HIV counseling and testing, adequate housing, bedding, counseling, support groups, home visits, and much more. The key word in all of this is resilience. The community-based partners that we work with are creating resilience in their communities and in the grandmothers that we work with. Children stay in school, HIV positive people stay on treatment, family units function better, and small but reliable incomes are produced. Ultimately, there are signs that people have recuperated to the extent that they're regaining their self-determination and they can take active control over their lives. What the grandmothers have been able to do is they've been able to put their grandchildren through schools. They've been able to learn how to harvest crops. They've even started local savings and loan groups. They've been teaching each other about HIV prevention and treatment. They form support groups and they deliver comfort and home through home-based care. This is how it works. The African community-based organizations design and propose. They actually submit a proposal to the Stephen Lewis Foundation. The Stephen Lewis Foundation enables those proposals to be turned into projects, and it sends out field representatives who assess the projects monitor them, counsel them, support them, and report back. Ida Lukaku, who I will speak a little bit about a bit more later on in the presentation, is one of these field reps. Well, actually, she began as a field rep. She's now the director of projects. There are 325 partner organizations in sub-Saharan Africa, as I mentioned. So how do you begin to evaluate the proposals that come in? Well, the evaluation criteria are tied to the goals and the missions. Women are involved in the leadership roles. This is one of the keys. People living with HIV and AIDS have to be represented in the organization's staff, management, and board. The community served is involved in planning and/or implementing the projects. The organization has to have a governance structure and management solidly in place. This isn't money that just goes to fund a good idea. The organization actually has to be able to manage the funds, and there has to be a partner organization for us to work with. And mostly, most important, if not, well, they're all important, but the beneficiaries cannot face discrimination in any way, including gender, religion, or status of their disease. Early on, the Stephen Lewis Foundation recognized that identifying the right partners wasn't possible without visiting them first. Proposals that receive sometimes can be perfectly written and are bureaucratically perfect, but others may simply be a couple of handwritten pages, but they have very compelling content about the needs of the community. So ultimately, it's more than a checklist of criteria. It's a demonstration of community care and conviction, expertise, and compelling. Sometimes the field visits show that there's an outstanding organization that's the heartbeat of its community, and they work with child-headed households, not even grandmother households, where no one else is present, or they're reaching an entire community of grandmothers. And so we don't reply or rely solely on what's on the paper. The field visit is an important element to build the relationship, to build understanding, and to build trust. After approval of the funds, the Stephen Lewis Foundation also conducts periodic assessments, and not in a critical way, but mostly to help them build their capacity and help them understand what needs to be done to implement and execute the programs. And we have seen some measurable success. 35,000 or more grandmothers have participated in support groups and income generation projects. 105,000 people have received HIV counseling and testing. More than 25,000 children and youth have received psychosocial support, and more than 77,000 clients have been reached through home-based care visits. More than 60 homes have been rebuilt or improved for grandmother-headed households. 93% of clients adhere to their HIV medication, and this is extremely important and much higher than any other group that is operating in this region have been able to report. And a lot of that has to do with the way in which the supports go on. 600 and plus more women and girls are supported by 15 partners to escape violence and attempt to seek justice. And more than 40,000 people have been reached through the LGBTIQ initiative. There's a partnership in Uganda which has brought together all of these partners, women, and its critical aim has been to build housing, and it's been very successful in creating housing, and not only creating housing, but going on to encourage. I'm actually going to go on to the next one rather than run this video, because one of the things that that project in Uganda has done is it's been so successful that government is now stepping up to create comparable housing in government areas that they have control over. Home-based care is something that I mentioned before, and it's really important in that in 10 of the 15 countries where our partners work, there's only one doctor available for every 10,000 people. This is where home care workers step in. Thousands of them support people who are leading full, healthy lives, and they provide essential health care to those who are living with HIV and AIDS. If hunger and nutrition are the challenges, they build and provide food baskets and guidance on food prep, supplies, and training. If stigma is demoralizing the people who are infected, loving environments and community support. If financial pressures are too great to do much else, the caregivers connect families to small businesses and help them create income generating opportunities. Home-based caregivers visit countless homes every day. They travel great distances. They go on foot or on bicycle, and the trust and healing that they generate is immeasurable. One of the partners of SOS summed it up beautifully when she said, "No woman dies without community around her, and no grandmother is left to struggle to raise orphaned children alone." And now I just want to show you some of the projects. In Botswana, there are two interesting projects going on, and once again, I skipped one. The first is with the Botswana Retired Nurses Society. They have formed a group to respond to their community with healthcare, and they draw their expertise from a pool of experienced and retired nurses, social workers, some of whom we have on the call today, and other professionals. They promote health and well-being. In Botswana, there's also an income generation project where the primary work is with the grandmothers again. The grandmothers support each other in peer-to-peer counseling groups, and they also knit, sew, and sell their products to members of the community. And some of them have become members of their village development committee. So they become part of the decision-making processes related to community development. In South Africa, there is a group called GAPA. Maybe we have, okay. All right. So, sorry, I was just going to ask about, there's a group called GAPA that runs something called an Indaba, where newcomers are welcomed every month to learn about the operation of this collective, and members have a platform to speak about current affairs that are affecting their communities. Grandmothers who are new to this group are invited to attend monthly 4-day workshops, and then they're invited to join a support group. Membership is voluntary, and the only requirement is active participation. Since its inception, GAPA has hosted training workshops for more than 900 grandmothers. GAPA is run by grandmothers and supplemented only with a small staff complement. The workshops that they run include HIV education, nutrition, parenting, and childcare, how to access government grants and business skills, vegetable gardening, human rights, elder abuse, which unfortunately exists there, bereavement, and even the drawing up of a will. As grandmothers against poverty and AIDS grow, they say that our approach, and this is one of the quotes, our approach to emotional and psychological support is activity-based. With the grandmothers, we use activities as a means of processing emotion, as well as a means to achieving an end product when the day is done. This is what happens when income-generating projects in which grandmothers are taught to make arts and crafts with beads. Our motto is, together we are stronger. We believe in collective effort. We believe in emotional and psychological support is based on collective activity. We believe in sharing and processing emotions and healing together. In Uganda, the Phoebe Education Fund for Orphans and Vulnerable Children, so this is a fund that is directed at the children, was started in 2003 by 3 brothers. These brothers had lost their own parents to AIDS, and they were able to attend school through the generosity of a local missionary. They graduated secondary school, they won scholarships to European universities. They could have stayed in Europe, but they came back to Uganda to work with rural women and children. And in 2003, they founded this Phoebe Educational Fund in their mother's name. This organization started with only 10 children and 4 districts, and it has grown immeasurably. Grandmother households are empowered through their Care for Caregivers program. They PEFO provides school fees, bursaries to HIV/AIDS affected orphans, most of whom, as we know, live under the care of their grandmothers. They run school clubs for students. They run drama clubs, music clubs, drawing, debate, and the children receive much needed attention and have the opportunity to share their experience with their peers. Support from the SOF also funds school fees, uniforms, supplies for the secondary school and primary school age children. The Action for Rural Women's Empowerment in Uganda brings women together to form supportive communities, and particularly women farmers and their children. They provide economic and lively assistance through training on agricultural techniques. They supply seeds to boost crop yields. They enable grandmothers to grow enough food to feed their families, while also generating income by selling the surpluses. In Uganda, the Naimba multi-purpose organization of people living with HIV/AIDS also works dramatically in the income generating field. They also do house construction for the elderly. They provide micro loans that allow people to start their own businesses. But in the agricultural side, animals such as goats, piglets, and heifers have been given out to people living with HIV/AIDS to help them improve on their own nutrition and receive income out of the profits that they realize from the sale of these animals. Once one is given, say, 2 piglets, she is required to pay back the same number of animals to the organization, and those are given out to other clients on the pending lists. A number of clients have benefited from this project, and they've achieved their goals in a very short amount of time. Over 220 clients have benefited from the micro loan schemes, where they can begin their own jobs and enterprises and generate income from that as well. Again, another quote: many people living with HIV become emotionally detached, stressed, and depressed, especially when they don't have the money or the means of survival. They feel that the world is caving in on them because of their HIV positive status. And then they go through further self-stigma and hopelessness. With income generating activities, one is made busy working with others. This reduces the time alone spent on sadness and self-criticism. And by the end of the day, one has money for transport, family and personal welfare, and the ability to take care of oneself puts a person's mind at rest and peace. In Ethiopia, we've actually seen some of the most difficult communities that we've encountered. The DFT, which is Developing Families Together, was established in 2002. And their needs have been as basic as providing food support. The provision of food services reduced the severe daily meal need problem of grandmothers and their grandchildren. And food provision has made school possible for orphans and vulnerable children. Also in this community, educational materials are provided. And again, and this is going to sound repetitive, but it is such an important element of the community support. Business and life skills are being provided to groups of women who are able to then start their own businesses. DFT states that with a $2,100 USD funding through a business loan, business life skills can be provided to a group of 20 Ethiopian women. This cost breaks down to $105 per woman, and that includes the loan, healthcare access, and training and mentorship. And the women in these organizations are able to then go on and start their own companies. And in this particular slide, we see two groups of women. One has started a restaurant serving home-cooked meals to construction workers during the day in the outskirts of Addis Ababa. And another group has started a spice making and wholesale distribution of milk and coal businesses. So they're dramatically changing their own lives and the lives of people around them. There's also another group in Ethiopia that provides training and empowerment of local and income women. And these women have formed 4 village saving and lending associations. So they've created their own little banking system and have been able to give each other loans and create savings, and have provided business skill training to more than 200 local women. 803 women living with HIV/AIDS have been reached with palliative care and peer support by this organization. And more than 250 orphans and vulnerable children living with HIV/AIDS have been excluded from formal, or previously excluded from formal school, because either they couldn't afford basic school material or they were engaged in various activities for survival. They've now been reached with psychological support and educational materials. Swaziland is another place where we see women at work, here working on a construction site. Tanzania, we see women at work, here working in a building community. In Zimbabwe, the Hope Tarero Trust provides play centers for children and home care workers. They have visits and social and emotional support to grandmothers and their children. Many teenagers and children living with HIV need nutritious food, access to health care, and support in taking the multiple pills a day for the rest of their lives. All of this while facing stigma and discrimination. In particular, we see a great impact on teenagers because of their the prevalence of sexual assault and interference. This has been long recognized as one of the primary causes of the high levels of HIV infection among girls in sub-Saharan Africa. In Malawi, there's a National Association for People Living with HIV and AIDS, and they hold sessions where young people can have in-depth discussions with healthcare workers. They run programs to end violence and strengthen community commitment to girls' rights. They want to bring together the knowledge, resolve, strength, and economic security and resilience of these girls to advocate for their own sexual rights and autonomy. The kinds of projects that are addressed include how the reproductive system works, how someone can get HIV, how to prevent pregnancy, the effects of teenage pregnancy, signs and symptoms of sexually transmitted diseases, how to avoid contracting sexually transmitted diseases, and how to deal with the peer pressure that affects the behavior of so many of the youth. Education like this is critical. As one grandmother poignantly put it, we will not raise more children for the grave. And in particular, we see children who are determined that HIV will not define them. And I'm actually going to attempt to show this again, because I find the voices of these kids to be so incredibly powerful that I'd like you to hear them, even if just for a few minutes. This is a 20-minute video, but I guarantee you I'm not going to show the entire 20 minutes, but I can send you the link if you would like to see it on your own.
Since I was a child, I used to take medication, and I didn't know why I was taking medication. When I reached 13, I asked my sisters, and they told me it's because I'm positive. I started getting discriminated by my friends. They would stay away from me because I had some rashes on my hands. And that's because I wasn't taking my medication very well. I would put on sweaters morning, evening. I wouldn't take off the sweaters because I was scared for people to see me like that. And that's when I made the decision to take my medication. From then, my viral load dropped to undetected, which encouraged me to be a peer supporter. I grew up knowing that HIV was only an aspect that was in my blood that makes me take medicines every day. But besides that, I had to live a normal life. I had dreams to achieve. I had plans, and I wanted to make the world know that we young people living with HIV can be just like everyone else. HIV can no longer define me, but I'll define it. You have grown and now you're having that joy to make you a champion amongst other young people living with HIV.
The monthly support meetings, when they come together, brought new meaning to life for these young people.
I know that if I wasn't trained, I would have gone through the same trail of the young people who are in my communities or the young people who are in my school. I started advocating for people living with HIV in the country. I have challenged the world with my status, and now I'm a champion.
My name is Abdul. I study in Madfam Primary School. I am ever happy at school. In future, I would like to be a bank manager.
I came to know Abijah Winfred in 2010 when she was brought to a manor house in a very malnourished state. She was not taking her treatment.
I was very sick. I simply heard that I was about to die.
Most of them are malnourished when they come to us, and we just use local food. We don't use anything that is exotic, local food, the food that is really available everywhere in the country. And also sometimes some of them can need supplements.
When I was sick, I did not have energy, but those people, my mama treated me until I became good.
HIV infection is not just treatment with medication, but you also have to affect the psychosocial well-being of the family. So they have better outcomes, they grow up, live longer, and are healthier.
The major thing is, of course, love. Some kids, they come in when they are full of sores. People feel attaching them, but when they're ill, you see, some of us will hug them. It just opens the brain of that kid that there's somebody who loves them. Play is an important aspect in the lives of children. We involve them in painting, sharing, and drawing the pictures.
Toy library is taking toys to the communities now. Scotland's run this program in disadvantaged areas. So the toy librarian will give the toys according to the child's age, according to the child's need.
Each case has to be handled differently. There are children that will not tell you what is wrong with them, but when you use the play aspect or the play therapy, you try to find out some of those issues by just observing them. Once someone has the knowledge, then they have the power to change their situation. For the small ones, as well as the grown ones, the grown-up children, we have to involve the guardians.
We do have education with the parents one-on-one. We also do awarenesses. But besides those awarenesses and health education, we also have got a parenting program where we invite each and every member of the family or of the community to come to the parenthood program.
Even if I am sick, I can still become a bank manager. I can still play with my friends. I can still learn. I can still enjoy my life.
I love that kid. I can watch her over and over again. The SLF also partners with organizations that provide urgent medical care for victims of sexual violence. One of these is the Pansy Hospital in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They treat survivors medically and they provide psychosocial services and legal advice. The Pansy staff have cared for more than 60,000 survivors of sexual violence. This is a staggering number, and the SLF has partners in other countries providing similar life-saving care and emotional support. Sorry. In some communities, especially in Tanzania and Kenya and Uganda, there's a traditional cultural expectation that a widow will be inherited into marriage with another male family member after the death of her husband. These forced marriages are a profound violation of these women's rights, and they also play a significant role in hastening the spread of the HIV virus. Pendeza Africa, PENAF, has formed a widows mutual support group, and they are focused on empowering women to be able to have a choice about whether or not they will remarry. They learn about their legal rights relating to marriage and inheriting their deceased husband's property. And once they have that knowledge, they can move forward. In each of these countries or these groups, we're also seeing an improvement in the ability of these women to manage the programs that they're involved with. For example, in Kenya, Ripples reports the following. It says, our groups can now write their own records, such as minutes and monthly savings records. They now meet under the leadership of their own chairpersons and secretaries. They can convene meetings, set agendas, discuss them with assistance from our staff. They're successful in designing their own income generation initiatives, and those have borne fruit and are now encouraging others to do as well. So what about COVID? Well, COVID is hitting Africa as well. And one of the important factors that we've seen is that the big organizations can't reach at the local level, but the small organizations, these community-based organizations, are already in place and are with the community. And it says, as this partner in South Africa says, we are hands-on. Even during lockdown, we can carry on supporting the community. So an example of this is Cindy, which is in Zambia. Cindy has worked with hundreds of grandmothers and caregivers, and what they're doing now at the time of COVID is they are providing household visits to grandmothers, and they're providing demonstrations of safety precautions through thorough hand washing. They're supplying soap and masks. They're distributing flyers and posters with relevant COVID information. And of course, they continue to provide all of the necessary social and psychological support. Through this, I mentioned earlier that this is a solidarity movement. And through this movement, there have been grandmother gatherings, and these are comings together of groups. There have now been 5 since 2006. There are 165 active groups, such as mine, in the campaign in Canada, the United States, UK, and now Australia. And 10,000 women have been involved in the Grandmothers Campaign over these last 15 years, raising funds and awareness in solidarity with the grandmothers in Africa. In Swaziland, 500 grandmothers got together in 2010. And you can see here the march. This was a march of 2,000 grandmothers who marched in solidarity in the city of Manzini then. In 2015, there was a comparable gathering in Uganda, in Entebbe. And here they wrote and distributed a Ugandan grandmother's statement, which called on government, the private sector, civil society, and members of the international community to support their collective vision for a future in which their grandchildren and and their communities can be thriving. Similar gatherings occurred in South Africa in 2016 and in Tanzania in 2018. And grandmothers from Canada have participated in all of these. A lot has changed in sub-Saharan Africa in the last 14 years. The grandmothers have gotten older, but they've also gotten a lot wiser. And they have demonstrated globally the success of what they're doing. And increasingly, they're becoming leaders, sharing their expertise, excuse me, in the communities and on the international stage. In Tanzania, there's a group called the Maasai Women Development Organization. And they report that 52 of their support groups are now registered and have started their own credit society. And the registration means that they are now recognized by their federal government as being an entity that has the right to stand up for changes in their own community. One of the women in this Maasai development organization said, in the past, if a woman wanted to speak at a village meeting, she would have to kneel. With home-based education and our empowerment groups, this expectation is in the past. In the past, village assemblies were only attended by men. Now women are included on the agenda and they participate in meetings. Women are increasingly being invited to participate in forums as equals. This growing visibility and confidence is encouraging women to take up other rights, such as owning land. Botswana similarly has a registered group called the Stepping Stones International, and they have been able to get themselves government funds to build an old age home and a cultural center to empower girls with life skills. Older persons' rights have become a central topic in many of these countries. And I want to tell you about one woman in Uganda named Mpata, who last year at the age of 77 won an election in her community to be the chairperson of the Older Persons Committee. She says, "This makes me proud because we have pressing issues, but the government has left us behind. I'm concerned with healthcare. Another granny who was elected is talking about social assistance. We believe that if we have representatives at all levels of government, these issues will be taken care of. This is just the beginning." These women are doing something new. This isn't like it was before AIDS came. As Kenneth Mugaweki says, before HIV, there was poverty. There was still gender inequality that was repressing their lives, keeping them down. You could hear them saying things like, "You know the men are repressing us. We are struggling. We have no property, but we have sons and daughters. They were only hanging on because of their children. And then when their children died, they had to rebuild something completely different." So you see, this goes way beyond recovery, way beyond reclaiming what was lost. This is something brand new that these women are doing, something entirely new that the world has never seen before. So as I mentioned before, there are 165 active groups across Canada, literally across Canada. And I want to tell you a little bit in the few minutes that I have left about the Canadian grandmothers. First of all, we're not actually part of the Stephen Lewis Foundation. We're not chapters of the SLF. We're actually small, independent grassroots groups, just like the African grandmothers. Sorry. We come together and we go into the community to make people aware of what's going on in Africa. And we also raise funds, which we provide to the Stephen Lewis Foundation to help them fund the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign. We don't adopt a particular community or raise funds for a specific project or program. For some people, this is frustrating because they want close contacts with the recipients. But we do understand that that's not the model the SLF has developed. And the one that the SLF has developed, which is very bottom up from communities in Africa, is one that works. The African communities take full responsibility for their progress, and Canadian grandmothers respect the African grandmothers' capability. Our job is to get them the resources so that they can do their work. We frequently meet with African field representatives when they come to Canada to share their stories and experiences. We have our own gatherings once a year in the fall. We have a newsletter. We have an annual review, year in review, and we see photos of the grandmothers and videos of them and their grandchildren, not in pain, but in action and determination and celebration. In 2011, the group that Zoe and I belong to was formed. Most of us were new to fundraising, and most of us were reluctant and shy to do so. But frankly, we came to realize that our asking for $1 is so much easier than what the African grandmothers are doing. And we became embarrassed to say out loud, this is too hard. We know there's great competition for donor dollars. And one of the things that sets us apart is that we know that 90 cents of every dollar that's raised goes directly to these projects. The SLF is a very lean organization and is extremely effective. We have found that our most comfortable way of fundraising is that we do events-based activities. We've sold jewelry and we have provided information at these events. And we're very proud to say that in the 10 years since we have been operating as a small group, and there are only about 22 of us right now, we've raised $170,000. We raised Kazuri jewelry, and I'm wearing one of this Kazuri necklaces right now. We've sold Kazuri jewelry. Kazuri is a institution that exists just outside Nairobi that makes beads and sells them around the world. We've held some very successful African jazz nights. We've also had silent auctions, which aren't very silent. We've hosted children's concerts, and we've held marketplaces. And we've also held a very successful event with, at the time, a very young and promising author named Ya Gyasi, who published her first book called Homegoing, that went on to become a tremendous success and on best of the year books in 2018. And we were one of the first organizations to recognize her talent. Her publisher brought her to Toronto, and we held an evening where she talked about her life and her book. Sometimes we work with other groups across Canada. There is an annual Stride to Turn the Tide, which is a walkathon, and it's held every year in communities right across the country. This year, because we haven't been able to, we're holding virtual walks, but we encourage our family and friends and everyone we know to participate in this. And also, because of Zoom, we've been able to do some events like fundraising yoga on Zoom as well. The grandmothers across Canada came together to put a concert on that was just held several weeks ago. And this concert raised $100,000. It featured music from East Coast to the West Coast. And our latest just finished last night. This was called our Explore Africa program, and we focused on the history, food, books, art, and travel in Africa. And it was very exciting and a lot of fun for us. At each of these events, we had about 100 Zoom participants. We've also, as a group, learned new skills. We've learned how to design web pages, how to do event planning. We found new opportunities to use some of the skills that we had developed at other times in our lives. We take turns being leaders, we stretch ourselves, and we educate others about the campaign. So what keeps us going? Well, I mentioned before that I was going to tell you a little bit more about Ida Lukaku. She was one of the first people that I personally met when I started working with the Stephen Lewis Foundation and working with our group. At that time, she was a field rep in Malawi, and she came to Toronto to talk, and I've met her probably a half a dozen times since then, and she always inspires me. But she told me a story a number of years ago when she had first gone into an Ethiopian village. The women couldn't make eye contact with her. They were so despondent. They just sat there. She had a presentation she wanted to give. They couldn't even listen to her. And over time, this group was encouraged to talk to each other, to support people in their community, and to start some of these income generation projects that I had mentioned before. And the SOF supported them in starting up selling farm vegetables and sewing. And it wasn't easy because they needed so much hands-on support. But they also were encouraged to save some money. I'm going back to Ida. They also were encouraged to save money. And a year after her first visit, Ida returned to her to the village. And one of the women ran up to her and showed her her bank book. And she said, thank you, Ida. My life has changed. With the money I earned, I can now buy oil for cooking and soap for washing. And remembering that, remembering the oil and the soap keeps us going whenever we lack motivation. African grandmothers inspire and amaze us every day. They have resilience, strength, and dignity, which we strive to emulate. They give us courage and confidence. We are using this stage of our lives to continue to be active and engaged. Perhaps most importantly, the grandmothers in Africa have modeled for us what we can do for each other. We, as a group of women, hardly knew each other when we came together, but we have supported each other through good times like the births of grandchildren and through very tough times like illness and death. We never expected a community, but while we were working together, we created one. And it's not all tears and hard work. Like these women, we don't sing, but we do have fun and we do laugh. And I'd like to thank you for listening to this presentation. Is there anything that I can answer? Are there any questions that any of you have?
Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And are there web pages where we could get more information about the Stephen Lewis organization?
Oh, yes. I can provide it to you. I can send you an email with all of the.
Could you perhaps put it in the chat?
Yes. Oh, I can put it in the chat right now.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'm relatively new to the group. I've only been in the group for a couple of months, but I want to say that, Helen, my understanding is that you started this grandmothers group. Is that correct?
Yes.
So
yes.
Look at what Helen's done.
And I'll tell you how I started it. I love this story. I went to a concert in 2011 that was being put on by a group of the grandmothers, the African grandmothers. And I was so moved by them that I went up to one of the Stephen Lewis staff people at the end of the evening. And I said, I really want to join a group. Can you tell me how to get in touch? And the woman said, why don't you start one? We'll help you. And so they were offering me the same support they offer women in Africa. And they did help me, and I did. And it's been a very important part of my life.
Yeah, so kudos to you, Helen.
Thank you. Thank you, Zoe. Any questions at all?
So many questions. Have you actually, I get a sense of work happens over there. So you travel over there as well?
No, the grandmother, well, grandmothers can go to the gatherings, those 5 gatherings, but we're not encouraged. In fact, we're discouraged from wanting to go to see any of the projects. It's just it's a sense that it's an intrusion into their lives. It's not a kind of show and tell, you know, and we have had, if I can take the time, I do want to tell you another story. One of the women in our group had maybe 18 years ago or so, adopted a young girl at the time, in Kenya. And she was living in Nairobi. And when our group started, I think I mentioned we started selling this Kazuri jewelry. And by that point, this young woman in Nairobi was about 19 or 20, I guess, and was unemployed. And the woman in our group gave her foster daughter the address and telephone number of the Kazuri. And she called them, and they invited her in for an interview. And it had nothing to do with us. They just invited her in for an interview. They hired her, and she has been working there for the last 10 years. She has since gotten married. She has a child. Her child is in their daycare program. Her whole life has turned around because of this jewelry that we started to sell. So, and it's just, you know, we talk about saving one life. That's one life that is so intimately connected to us. And she sends us letters all the time and pictures and keeps us informed.
Do you ever do sort of a live Zoom or live interface chat with people in the communities?
No, we don't.
Okay. Okay.
No. No, we talk to the SLF people. We see them all the time. They come to Canada a lot, the field reps. So we meet with them.
Right.
I personally spent a lot of time in Africa before I retired. So I think that was one of my connections to it, is that I had been there and I had seen the poverty and I'd seen the role of women, and it was very important for me.
What took you to Africa?
I worked for Ontario Hydro, and we had a section that, a division called Ontario Hydro International. We provided staff for projects to strengthen the utilities in Africa. So we worked with the electricity utility in Ethiopia. I spent a lot of time in Ethiopia, and Zimbabwe and Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania. I forgot about Tanzania. So, and I was one of the project managers, so I was there on a regular basis.
Do you know where in the Congo, where any of the mothers meet in Congo?
I'm sorry, do I know where exactly
do you know any of the towns or villages in Congo where they are?
Where they're active? No, but I could find out for you very easily. Would you like me to get that information for you?
Well, yes, that would be good. If somehow, if you send it to Manor Road, that's the thing.
Okay, I will.
We'll transpose that to you, Kathy. Perfect. Okay.
And I'd love to be able to buy some of the jewelry when I come over to Manor Road.
Well, we can certainly arrange that, because normally, well, actually, what we have, Helen and Zoe, we did about a month ago, we did a virtual fair where we were able to recreate the idea of having what normally we have in a regular setting, with about 10 different breakout rooms, and we actually were selling items online, and it worked out quite well. So probably what we can do, if we do have one of those again in the fall, hopefully we'll either virtual and or in person, we could have you set up a table. That'd be one perfect. Yeah.
Thank you. We also have a virtual table. So I will send you, as I said, I'll give you the link to our site and
virtual table. Okay, good.
Yeah, and we have a marketplace on our website. So wonderful. Okay. I had promised to put that in, but I haven't done it yet. So I will. I'll do it right now.
Very, very good. It helps.
For sure, we'd be happy to have a table if you have something in the fall.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And is it like it sounds like a bit like a social enterprise, because the women are making the jewelry and then benefiting from the sale.
Yes.
Right. Oh, good. Good. Wonderful.
Yeah, it's a.
Do people have other questions? I see someone texting. Oh, there's the link. Let me just call the chat up. And then
I also just wanted to add that we're always looking for new members, if any of you are interested or know of people that might be interested.
So do you have to be a grandmother?
No, I'm sorry, I should have said that. No, it's grandmothers and grandothers. We have a number of people who are not grandmothers.
All right.
We don't have any men. Okay. We only have women, but we have a number of people who aren't. We have a lot of people who support us, though. We have people. We have one honorary man. He's the partner of one of our women, and he's been an enormous supporter right from the beginning. So he's kind of our honorary grandmother friend.
That's exciting. How often would you? Like, I'm assuming the virtual jewelry table is open all the time.
Yes.
In non-COVID times, would you then perhaps have events where you did have jewelry tables open, or so to speak? Or?
Yes. Yeah, we go to various different places for marketplaces. Well, right. we usually have a Christmas market, and right. Over the years, we typically held it at Cummer and Leslie. There's a community center there. So we held it there for a number of years. So we've held it in various different places around the province.
Oh, how exciting.
Mhm.
So when you think of when you first became involved with the project and today, I mean, I know the number of instances of HIV continues to raise, and certainly with COVID-19, it's put a greater strain on the capacity for people. Do you see as COVID numbers begin to level off, they'll be able to spend more energy again on HIV?
Oh, of course. Yeah. The COVID has impacted Africa in kind of a different way from, I mean, no, you know what, that's not fair. It's impacted us this way too. One of the things that it's done is, first of all, it's made it difficult for people to get their medication.
Right.
You know, they can't get out to get it. You know, there are curfews and limitations on movement. It's also dramatically impacted income, food security, because all of this income generation activity is not happening anymore. And it's not that we're not dependent. Of course, there are many people in our own society who are extremely dependent on the jobs that they've lost. But much of African society doesn't have the safety nets that we have. And so we're talking about lack of food.
Yeah.
It is a direct result of the challenges that come from having a lockdown society. So hopefully that will be resolved quickly.
Any other questions for people?
I don't know if have vaccines reached the continent in any big way yet.
No, I don't think so.
No.
I've heard it depends on the country. I've heard
Yeah.
scary figures, like some countries won't get vaccine till 2023, which is really terrible.
Yeah.
It's related to capacity and
Yeah, there's a lot going on politically around with the WTO, with the World Trade Organization, around having a waiver on some of the patents to get the vaccines into some of these countries.
sooner rather than later. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, it's been a delight having you both, and again,
Thank
we'll
you.
just have to check out your virtual jewelry table, and I think that's something we could probably post in our weekly network, and certainly to have you in the fall, and I think that'll be quite interesting. Actually, a good spin around for this might even be we're having a virtual caravana at the Manor the first Monday or last Monday in July, and so I mean I think I know Africa is different than caravana, but I think it has a better connection than some other things might. And so I mean, here's a thought: if caravana had been taking place in real time, would you have had a table set up somewhere? That would be the question I might ask.
I don't think so. No, I don't. I think
well,
we
then-
thought about it in the past. You know, it's interesting. We tend our two sort of times of the year that we tend to be out in the community are Christmas and Mother's Day. We usually do something just ahead of Mother's Day, a couple of weeks ahead of Mother's Day. But we haven't in the past done anything caravana. I guess we should have thought about it, maybe in the future.
Well, we can reflect on that, whether it seems to be a good fit, and go from there. But in the meantime, we'll ask Susan Johnson to offer her thanks and tell us about next week.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And next week we have Kamar Morgan, who runs an excellent restaurant, caters, does delivery, about Jamaican food and why is it so delicious.
And just add one more bit, because our community never changes, or always changes and adds new things. Miss May, our wonderful Miss May, asked, do we have anybody in our community who can do something with hair, because we'll be cutting a lot of our hair because of COVID. And actually, as a part 2 for next week, we'll be having Dee Esposito from Angel Hair for Kids also talking. And I'm sorry, Sue, I should have told you that was sort of a last minute addition.
That's all right.
And to our week, because a lot of women who have let their hair grow will have a lot of hair left over. And so why not give it to a charity that needs it? These are essentially wigs that are created for children and young youth who are experiencing hair loss for cancer treatment. This was a wonderful charity in that respect. It's definitely helping. But it's been a delight and honor to have you here today. And we'll circle back perhaps about the fall and other times, and certainly your virtual jewelry table. So thank you, Helen and Zoe. Take care,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
You have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Thank you.
Bye.